Something is happening on American highways right now, and most people have no idea it's already begun. Not a prototype, not a concept, not a promise made on a stage somewhere in Silicon Valley. A real machine, moving real freight in real time, silently. And the trucking industry will never be the same. For over 100 years, one sound defined the American road: the growl of a diesel engine. Heavy, deep, unmistakable. It meant commerce was moving. It meant the economy was alive. It meant something was being delivered to someone who needed it. That sound became the heartbeat of modern civilization. But here's what nobody is telling you. That heartbeat is changing. Not with a revolution, not with headlines and protests and government mandates forcing the change overnight. It's happening quietly, at 3 in the morning, in loading docks in Nevada, on mountain grades in California, on empty highways in Wyoming where the only witness is the desert itself. The Tesla Semi is doing something that diesel trucks cannot do, and the companies that figured that out first are now counting money in ways they weren't before. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't a story about technology. It's a story about money, about survival, about an industry built on fossil fuel economics finally meeting something it cannot outrun. And the numbers, when you actually look at them, are almost offensive in how clear they are. Let's start with the problem, because the problem is real, and it's been real for a long time. Running a diesel truck today costs somewhere around 80 cents per mile. That's not a guess. That's the industry average. Fuel, maintenance, repairs, downtime, the whole picture. And when you multiply 80 cents by 100,000 miles per year, per truck in a fleet of 50 or 100 or 500, the number becomes staggering. But it's not just the amount, it's the unpredictability. Diesel prices don't follow logic. They follow geopolitics. Every war, every sanction, every pipeline dispute, every tension in the Middle East, or the Gulf, or anywhere oil moves through the world's pressure points, ends up on the fuel receipt of a truck driver in Kansas. Fleet operators have tried for decades to plan around this, to hedge, to negotiate long-term fuel contracts, to squeeze efficiency from engines that are already operating near their physical limits. And then the price spikes anyway. $6 a gallon, $7 in California. The second highest diesel prices in recorded history, hitting the market in a period when supply chains were already fractured and margins were already thin. For fleet operators running hundreds of trucks, that kind of price movement isn't an inconvenience. It's an existential threat. And this is exactly the moment the Tesla Semi walked in. 23 cents per mile. Not as a marketing claim, not as a theoretical calculation performed in a lab by engineers with optimistic spreadsheets. As a real-world measured average coming out of actual operational data, 23 cents per mile for energy costs on the Tesla Semi versus 80 cents total operating cost for diesel. Let that gap sit with you for a moment. A single truck running 100,000 miles per year. That's a difference of nearly $60,000 per truck every year, before you account for maintenance, before you account for downtime, before you account for anything except the pure cost of making the wheels turn. But here's the part that changes the entire conversation. The maintenance story is almost more dramatic than the fuel story. A diesel engine is a miracle of engineering. It really is. Hundreds of moving parts working together in a controlled explosion environment, thousands of times per minute, for hundreds of thousands of miles. The fact that they work as reliably as they do is genuinely impressive. But those parts wear, they heat, they stress, they fail, and fixing them costs time. And time in trucking costs money in ways that don't show up on a simple maintenance invoice. No oil changes on the Tesla Semi, no air filters, no complex exhaust treatment systems with injectors and catalysts and particulate filters that need replacement on schedules that feel deliberately designed to drain your budget. No multi-speed transmission hunting through gears on a mountain grade. No turbocharger waiting to fail at the worst possible moment on the worst possible highway. Fewer parts, less wear, less downtime, less money leaving the operation. The uptime rate on the Tesla Semi runs as high as 95%. In trucking terms, that's almost science fiction. Diesel fleets routinely plan for trucks being out of service for maintenance and repair. It's budgeted, It's expected. It's just the cost of operating in a world where the machines are mechanically complex and the miles are hard. 95% uptime means the truck is almost always moving, and a truck that's moving is a truck that's making money. But wait, there's something even bigger underneath all of this. The battery in the Tesla Semi is designed to last 1 million miles. 1 million miles. A diesel engine needs a major overhaul somewhere between 3 and 500,000. That means, halfway through the Tesla Semi's operational life, a comparable diesel truck is already on its second engine, already absorbing the cost of a rebuild that can run into tens of thousands of dollars in parts and labor and time. Think about what that means for the asset value of the machine. Think about what that means for the resale market. Think about what it means for a fleet operator making a decision about where to put capital for the next decade. And now we need to talk about the price, because this is where a lot of people stop listening, and they probably shouldn't. The long-range Tesla Semi reportedly carries a price tag around $290,000. That's real. That's not a rumor. And yes, a comparable diesel truck can be purchased for somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000. The gap is real and the sticker shock is real. But here's the thing about sticker shock. It's almost always a short-term thinking problem. The trucking industry operates on cost per mile, not purchase price. A vehicle isn't furniture. It isn't a consumer product you buy and depreciate on a spreadsheet. It is a profit-generating asset. And a profit-generating asset is evaluated on what it returns, not what it costs on the day you sign the check. With $30,000 to $40,000 in annual operating savings, and that's a conservative estimate across fuel and maintenance combined, the Tesla Semi closes the price gap with a diesel truck in somewhere between 3.5 and 4 years, on a machine designed to run for over a decade. 4 years to break even. 6 or more years of operating at a cost structure that diesel cannot compete with. Not won't. Cannot. Physically, mechanically, economically, cannot. And that's before the incentives. In California, the HVIP program currently offers up to $120,000 per qualifying zero-emission truck. $120,000 off the purchase price. Before you negotiate, before you factor in any federal credits. With that incentive applied, the effective price of a Tesla Semi drops to around $170,000, which puts the price gap over diesel at somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. At that gap, with those operating savings, the break-even point isn't 3.5 years, it's under 1 year, under 12 months. That's why PepsiCo signed the contracts. That's why Walmart signed the contracts. These are not companies making emotional bets on clean technology. These are companies with shareholders and quarterly earnings reports and procurement teams whose entire job is to make the numbers work. And the numbers work. But here's what nobody is talking about. The aerodynamics. Because buried inside the Tesla Semi's performance story is an engineering achievement that most people walk right past. A standard diesel truck has a drag coefficient somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8. If that number doesn't mean anything to you, here's a reference point. The Bugatti Veyron, one of the most aerodynamically refined machines ever put on a public road, has a drag coefficient of 0.4. The Tesla Semi also has a drag coefficient of 0.4. A Class 8 freight truck with the aerodynamic profile of a supercar. This isn't a marketing talking point. It was confirmed by engineering data from within the program. And the reason it matters operationally is that at highway speeds, aerodynamic drag accounts for 50 to 60% of a truck's total energy consumption. More than half the energy going into moving the vehicle is fighting the air. A truck that fights the air needs less energy to move, which means less battery for the same range, which means less weight, which means more payload, which means more revenue per trip. It's a chain reaction. One engineering decision multiplying itself through the economics of every single route the truck ever runs. And then there's the regenerative braking system. Every time a diesel truck slows down on a highway exit, on a mountain descent, in urban traffic, kinetic energy disappears as heat from the brake pads. That heat is wasted energy, and it also destroys the brakes. Diesel trucks and heavy haul service need brake replacement on a schedule that represents a meaningful, ongoing maintenance cost. Beyond cost, there's safety. Brake fade on a long mountain descent with a full load is one of the most dangerous conditions in trucking. The Tesla Semi recovers 70 to 80% of that energy and feeds it back into the battery. Every downhill becomes a partial recharge. Every deceleration extends the range. And the brake pads barely wear. They could theoretically last the operational life of the vehicle. What was a cost became an asset. Now let's talk about the charging problem, because this was the argument against electric trucks for years. And it was a fair argument. What's the point of saving money on fuel if the truck sits for 5 or 6 hours every time it needs a charge? In an industry where time and miles are the same currency, a half-day charging stop isn't an inconvenience. It's a business model killer. Tesla built the megacharger network to answer that argument directly. Peak power delivery of up to 1.2 megawatts. To put that in perspective, most electric truck competitors charge at somewhere between 250 and 350 kilowatts. The megacharger is roughly 4 to 5 times more powerful than that. The result is 60% battery recovery in approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes. And here's the piece of timing that feels almost too convenient to be coincidental. Federal regulations in the United States require commercial drivers to take mandatory rest breaks after a certain number of continuous driving hours, the required break, and the megacharger's 30-minute window align almost perfectly. The truck charges while the driver rests. No additional downtime, no disruption to delivery schedules, no argument left standing against operational viability. The charging problem doesn't exist anymore. But now, we need to address something that sits uncomfortably at the center of this entire story. Something that the financial projections and the cost per mile analyses and the aerodynamic data cannot fully account for. The people. There are millions of professional truck drivers in the United States, more around the world. These are not statistics. They are people who built careers and bought homes and raised children around a profession that is now being reshaped by forces they didn't choose and cannot control. The transition to electric trucks, even at the pace it's currently happening, represents a change in the economics of their industry that affects their daily lives in real and immediate ways. And the vision beyond electric trucks, the fully autonomous semi-operating without a driver in the cab, takes that concern and multiplies it by an order of magnitude. Elon Musk has been explicit about the endgame: a Class 8 truck operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without a driver. No wages, no benefits, no hours of service limitations, no human error behind the wheel. The economics for fleet operators become almost incomprehensibly favorable. Driver costs in trucking currently run around $1 per mile. Remove that from the equation and the profit margin transformation is total. But remove that from the equation, and you've also removed the livelihood of millions of people who did nothing wrong, except choose a profession that technology is now pursuing. This is not a hypothetical moral concern for a philosophy seminar. This is happening. Slowly. Then, if history is any guide, suddenly. The regulatory path to fully driverless commercial trucking on public highways is long and genuinely uncertain. Lawmakers are cautious. The public is uncomfortable. The liability questions around a software failure in an 80,000-pound vehicle are not small questions. They are the kinds of questions that generate years of litigation and legislation before anything gets resolved. But here's the perspective that matters for anyone trying to understand the trajectory. The question is not whether autonomous trucking will eventually arrive. The physics and economics of it are too compelling. The question is the pace and the human cost of that pace. And whether the systems we have, economic support systems, retraining programs, social safety nets, are capable of absorbing the disruption at whatever speed the technology actually moves. History suggests we tend to answer that question after the fact. Now let's talk about the 2026 update specifically. Because the refinements Tesla made to this machine based on real operational data from PepsiCo and DHL, deployments represent something genuinely significant. The truck shed approximately 1,000 pounds compared to earlier prototypes. In trucking economics, weight is the enemy of profit. Federal regulations cap gross vehicle weight at 80,000 pounds for conventional trucks, with a slight electric vehicle exemption pushing that to 82,000. Every pound removed from the vehicle is a pound that can be added to the cargo. Multiply that across thousands of trips per year, and the revenue impact is measurable and real. The 4,680 battery cells at the heart of the new version carry higher energy density than the previous generation, which means Tesla can achieve the same range with fewer cells. Fewer cells means less total battery weight. Less battery weight means more payload capacity. The engineering decisions compound into each other in ways that make the financial model continuously improve. The move to a 48-volt low-voltage architecture, replacing older 12 and 24-volt systems, allows for thinner, lighter wiring throughout the vehicle. More power delivered with less copper, less weight, more efficiency. Small gains that add up across a machine designed to run 1,000,000 miles. The camera-integrated mirror system reduces aerodynamic turbulence around the cabin and cuts wind noise that accumulates into driver fatigue over long hauls. A driver who arrives at the end of a shift less exhausted is a safer driver. A safer driver is a lower liability. A lower liability is a better insurance profile. The chain continues. Electric power steering replacing hydraulic systems eliminates a mechanism that is heavy, prone to leaks, and wastes energy maintaining hydraulic pressure even when you're driving in a straight line. The electric system delivers precise, responsive control with instant feedback and carries reinforced actuators that handle the steering load of a fully loaded 82,000-pound vehicle without drama. Every one of these changes is a data point in the same direction, and the production target attached to all of this is where reality requires honesty. Elon Musk has listed the Tesla Semi as one of 3 priority products for the company this year. The stated production target is 50,000 units. If Tesla hits that number, they would capture nearly 20% of the entire United States Class 8 truck market in their first year of mass production. That is an extraordinary claim. The honest assessment is that 50,000 units this year is almost certainly not achievable. The production facility inside Gigafactory Nevada exists. The assembly line is real, the automation is there. But launching a new vehicle platform at scale is a different engineering challenge than designing the vehicle in the first place. Early production always encounters supply chain constraints, process calibration issues, and quality control friction that takes months to resolve. The Tesla Semi's 9 to 100 kilowatt-hour battery pack, roughly 14 times the capacity of the battery in a Model Y, places enormous demand on battery cell production. Tesla is still scaling its 4,680 cell output in Nevada. Every semi-battery built is competing for supply with passenger vehicles and energy storage systems that also need those cells. A realistic production estimate for this year sits somewhere between 5 and 10,000 units. That's still historic. That's still the largest deployment of electric Class 8 trucks in history. But it's not 50,000. And fleet operators planning procurement around that number should build their timelines with that reality in mind. The more interesting number is what happens in 28, 29, 2030. Because Tesla has a documented history with production ramps, the Model 3 looked impossible. Then it happened. The Model Y looked ambitious. Then it became the best-selling vehicle in the world. The Cybertruck had years of delays, and then started rolling out at a pace that surprised the people who had written it off. The pattern is consistent. Slow start, painful ramp, then acceleration that leaves the skeptics without an argument. If Tesla reaches 50,000 semis per year by 28 or 29, which is plausible, they will have reshaped American freight economics in a time frame that the industry did not fully prepare for. The infrastructure is moving to meet them. The V4 supercharger network, designed to deliver up to 1.2 megawatts specifically for the Semi, is being deployed along major freight corridors. Green charging lanes at ports and distribution centers are being built. The ecosystem that makes the economics work is being assembled around the vehicle as the vehicle scales. This is how infrastructure transitions happen. Not all at once, piece by piece, until one day the pieces connect and suddenly the system exists, and the old system looks like it was always going to be replaced. We are somewhere in the middle of that process right now, and here's the final perspective that ties all of this together. The Tesla Semi isn't the most dramatic story in transportation. It doesn't have the cultural electricity of a sports car or the consumer appeal of a sleek sedan. It's a truck, moving boxes, on highways, in the dark. But freight transportation is the circulatory system of the modern economy. When the cost of moving things drops significantly, the cost of things themselves eventually follows. When the reliability of that movement improves, supply chains stabilize. When the environmental cost of that movement decreases, the collective ledger of industrial civilization improves in ways that compound across decades. A Class 8 truck running 23 cents per mile instead of 80, running for 1,000,000 miles instead of 500,000, charging in 30 minutes instead of sitting for 6 hours, operating with 95% uptime instead of being grounded for maintenance. These are not incremental improvements. These are structural changes to the economics of an industry that touches everything else. The diesel engine had 100 years. It earned that century honestly. It powered the growth of the global economy through wars and recessions and technological revolutions. It deserved its dominance. But something has arrived that is simply better. Not better in every context. Not better for every operator in every geography with every route profile. But better in enough contexts, for enough operators, on enough routes, that the direction of travel is no longer genuinely in question. The only question left is speed. How fast does this transition actually move? How quickly do the economics make the decision obvious to the people who are still waiting? How soon do the charging networks reach the routes that currently lack coverage? How many years before the Tesla Semi is not the interesting alternative in a diesel world, but the default option in a world where diesel has become the interesting alternative? And the question underneath all of that, the one that sits at the intersection of technology and humanity and economics and time, is this the beginning of the end for diesel? Or are we watching another chapter in a story that has been told before, the story of a promising technology that took far longer than anyone expected to actually displace an entrenched industry? The trucks are already running. The numbers are already clear. The drivers are already sleeping while the highway passes beneath them in silence. You tell us what you think that means. Drop your answer in the comments right now, because the road ahead of this conversation is a lot more interesting than the road behind it.